My stepmother got the call at 6:47 in the morning. By 8:15, she was at the hospital. Not in my room. In the cafeteria. Eating a cinnamon roll and arguing with a vending machine about a stuck water bottle. I know this because the security guard told me 3 weeks later. When I came back for my follow-up scan and he recognized me from the gurney they'd wheeled in. He thought I should know. He said it the way people say things when they've been holding them too long. Ma'am, I just thought you should know. She didn't go up. Not that morning. Not that whole day. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name doesn't matter for this part. What matters is that I'm 31 years old. I'm a structural engineer at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte. And for the last 9 years, I have been the financial backbone of a family that does not, technically, share my blood. I didn't know that last part until a Tuesday in October. I knew the first 2 parts every single day of my life. The way you know your own teeth. My stepmother married my father when I was 8. My mother had died when I was 4. Of something the adults whispered about and I didn't understand until I was 12 and Googled it. Aneurysm. She was making coffee. She was 36. I have one memory of her, and I'm not even sure it's real anymore. She's wearing a yellow sweater. She's laughing at something on the radio. That's all I have. My stepmother brought her own daughter, Camille, who was 6. Camille was small and blonde and had a laugh like a wind chime, and from the moment they moved into our house in suburban Raleigh, she was the sun and I was something that orbited her. I don't say that with self-pity. I say that because it was so consistent, so structural, that even strangers noticed it within 5 minutes. The dance teacher noticed. The pediatrician noticed. My 4th-grade teacher pulled my father aside at a parent conference and asked, gently, if everything was okay at home. My father said everything was fine. My father said a lot of things were fine. He died of a heart attack when I was 22, 3 months into my first real engineering job. He left no will, which I would later learn was deliberate, not careless. He left a house in my stepmother's name, a small retirement account that went to her, and one envelope addressed to me with a savings bond worth $740. I kept the envelope. I still have it in a drawer. I have never cashed the bond. By 23, I was sending my stepmother money. It started small. Her car needed new brakes. Camille was applying to grad schools, and the application fees added up. The water heater in the house, which I had grown up in, which had my height marked on the laundry room door frame in my father's handwriting, died in February. By 26, I was sending $1,500 a month. By 29, $2,000. By the time I was 30, I was paying their property taxes, Camille's car insurance, Camille's gym membership at a place that charged $200 a month and had a eucalyptus steam room, and a household maintenance fund my stepmother had invented that I never saw an itemized accounting of. I want to be honest about why. I want to be honest because the comments under videos like this one always ask, and I think it's a fair question, and I've spent 2 years in therapy trying to answer it for myself. I did it because when I was 9, I came home from school with a stomach bug and threw up in the hallway, and my stepmother made me clean it up myself while she took Camille to ballet. I did it because when I was 12 and got my first period at school, I called my father from the nurse's office, and he said he'd send my stepmother, and she never came. And I rode the bus home with a wad of toilet paper in my underwear. And when I walked in, she looked up from a magazine and said, "Oh, you figured it out. Good." I did it because at 16, when I made the honor roll, no one said anything. But when Camille got a B+ in geometry that same week, we went out for steak. I did it because somewhere in my body, I had decided that if I was useful enough, large enough, indispensable enough, they would finally see me. Not love me. I had given up on love, but see me. Acknowledge that I was in the room. It didn't work. Of course it didn't work. But I was very good at engineering and very bad at acknowledging the obvious, And so I kept doing it. The morning I collapsed was a Tuesday. I had been working on a hospital expansion project, which is darkly funny in retrospect, and I had not slept more than 4 hours a night for 6 weeks. The deadline was Friday. My boss, a woman named Priya, who has since become more of a mother to me than anyone who shares my last name, had told me 3 times to take a day. I told her I would, after the deadline. I was eating granola bars at my desk for lunch. I was forgetting to drink water. My left arm had been tingling for 2 days, and I told myself it was the way I was sitting. I stood up to refill my water bottle at 11:23 a.m. I remember the time because the clock on the wall was directly in my eye line. I remember standing up. I do not remember anything after that for almost 40 hours. What I learned later, in pieces, from Priya and from the hospital records, and from a junior engineer named Lourdes who happened to be walking past the kitchenette, I went down hard. I hit my temple on the corner of the counter. I had a stroke. Specifically, an ischemic stroke, brought on by what the neurologist called a catastrophic confluence of stress factors, dehydration, and a previously undiagnosed clotting disorder. I was 31. I had never smoked. I drank wine, maybe twice a year. My cholesterol was fine. I was in the ICU at Atrium Health on Blythe Boulevard. They had me in a medically induced state for the first 36 hours to manage the swelling. The hospital called my emergency contact, which was, by ancient default, my stepmother. She'd been my emergency contact since I was 18, and I had simply never updated it. The way you never update the things that feel both too small and too large to touch. She told the hospital she would be there as soon as possible. Then she went to Cabo. I want to be precise about this, because when I tell people, they often think I'm exaggerating. She had been planning a trip with Camille and Camille's fiancé, a man named Brennan whose family owned a chain of car dealerships in the Triad. The trip had been booked for months. It was a wedding planning getaway, which meant Camille wanted to look at beach venues for a destination ceremony, even though the wedding itself was going to be in Asheville. The trip was funded, in part, by money I had wired the previous month for what my stepmother called wedding-adjacent expenses. The hospital called her at 12:14 p.m. on Tuesday. Her flight was at 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday. She took the flight. She told the hospital she would be in touch and to call her again only in the event of imminent death. She used those words. The charge nurse, a woman named Della, who would later become one of the most important people in my life, wrote them down on the intake form because she could not believe she was hearing them. I woke up on Thursday morning. The room was dim. There was a styrofoam cup on the bedside table with cold tea in it. My head felt like it was wrapped in batting. I couldn't move my left hand at first, and the panic that came with that was so total I think it actually helped wake me up the rest of the way. A nurse came in, then another nurse, then a man in a white coat I didn't recognize. They asked me my name. They asked me the year. They asked me who the president was. I got all 3 right, though my voice sounded like it was coming from a different room. Then they asked if there was someone they could call. I said my stepmother. Of course I said my stepmother. I didn't know yet. I gave them the same number that was already in their system. The man in the white coat looked at the charge nurse. The charge nurse looked at the floor. The nurse on my left squeezed my hand, gently. The hand that could still feel things. "We've already spoken with her, honey," the charge nurse said. "She's out of town." I assumed she meant work. My stepmother didn't work. She hadn't worked since she married my father. But my brain wasn't running on all cylinders, and I just nodded. "When will she be back?" The charge nurse looked at the man in the white coat. He nodded, just slightly. "She's in Mexico, sweetheart, with your sister, it sounds like. She said she'd be back next week." I want to describe what happened in my chest when I heard that. But I don't think I can. It wasn't surprise. That's the part I keep coming back to. It wasn't surprise. It was something older and quieter. Something that had been sitting in me since I was 9 and throwing up in a hallway. It was the sound of a hypothesis being confirmed. I closed my eyes. I was very, very tired. Okay, I said. Thank you. The first visitor I had was Priya, my boss. She came at 4 in the afternoon on Thursday. She brought me a phone charger and a paperback novel and a bouquet of yellow roses. And she sat in the chair next to my bed, and she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Honey, I am so sorry you scared us." I started crying. I don't cry easily. I cried for about 20 minutes, and Priya just held my good hand and let me. Then Lords came. Then 2 other engineers from the firm. Then the receptionist, a woman in her 60s, named Marisol, who had always slipped me peppermints when I had a hard meeting. By Thursday night, I had a small wall of flowers and cards on the windowsill. And the nurses kept commenting on it. "You're a popular lady," one of them said. She didn't know. I didn't tell her. My phone was on the bedside table. It had been brought in with my purse. It had 143 notifications, almost all of them from work. There were 3 texts from my stepmother. The first, sent Tuesday at 1:02 p.m., hospital called. "Hope you're okay. We're already at the airport, no way to change tickets. Camille has worked so hard on this trip. Please understand." The second, Wednesday at 9:14 a.m., "Any update? Camille is stressed. Please don't make this about you right now." The third, Wednesday at 6:47 p.m. "By the way, Brennan's parents are paying for our cabana upgrade. You don't need to send the $4,000 we discussed, although if he wanted to contribute something toward the catering deposit, it's due Monday." I read them 3 times. Then I put the phone face down on the bedside table. I did not respond. Friday morning, the neurologist came in to talk to me about what they had found. The clotting disorder was genetic, he said. It was something I had inherited, and I should encourage my biological relatives to get tested. I told him I didn't have any biological relatives I was in contact with. My mother had died when I was 4. My father had died 9 years ago. I was an only child. He looked at his chart. He frowned, just for a second. Then he smoothed his face out. "Well," he said, "if anything changes, please let us know." I didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought he was just being thorough. That afternoon, Della came in to check my vitals. Della was in her 50s, black, originally from Charleston, and she had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without meaning to. She had been the one to take the call from my stepmother on Tuesday. She had been the one who wrote down imminent death only. She finished my vitals and then she stood there for a second, looking at me. "Sugar," she said. "Can I ask you something that's none of my business?" I said yes. "Have you looked at your visitor log?" I told her I didn't know I had one. She told me every patient in the ICU has one. Every person who comes in and asks about you, who tries to see you, who calls about you, gets logged. It was hospital policy, especially for stroke patients, especially for people who weren't fully conscious for the first 36 hours. "I think," she said carefully, "you might want to look at it." She went out to the desk and brought back a printout. It was 3 pages long. The first page was mostly what I expected. Priya. Lords. The other engineers. Marisol. A couple of names I didn't recognize at first that turned out to be friends from college who had seen Priya's post in the firm's internal Slack and driven up from Greensboro. The visits ranged in length from 15 minutes to almost 2 hours. People had sat with me. People had read to me apparently while I was still under. I started crying again. Quietly, this time. I turned to the second page. More of the same. The lead engineer on my hospital project, who I'd barely spoken to outside of meetings, had come at 6 a.m. on Wednesday before going to the office. He had stayed for 40 minutes, and then, on the third page, near the bottom, I saw a name I didn't know. Wendell Aronowitz. Visited Tuesday 8:50 p.m. Stayed until visiting hours ended at 11 p.m. Visited Wednesday 5:45 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Visited Wednesday 5:45 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Visited Wednesday 7:15 p.m. to 11 p.m. Visited Thursday 5:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. Visited Thursday 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Every shift, every visiting window. 2.5 hours before sunrise, 4 hours after dinner. Hour after hour, in a chair next to my bed, while I had been unconscious and then barely conscious and then sleeping. A man I had never heard of in my life. I looked at Della. "Who is this?" Della pulled up the chair. She sat down. "Sugar," she said. "I was hoping you would ask me that. He came back this morning. He's in the waiting room right now. He's been there since 6. He doesn't want to bother you. He told me to tell you, only if you wanted to know, that he's been waiting for 32 years, and he can wait another day." I didn't know what was happening. I really didn't. I just looked at her. "He says he's your father, baby." I want to describe what came next, but I'm not sure I can do it in order. I remember Della going to get him. I remembered the door opening. I remember a man in his late 60s, in a flannel shirt and corduroys, with white hair cut short, with my mother's eyes. I knew they were my mother's eyes because they were also my eyes. And I had never seen them on another face before. I remember he stopped in the doorway, and he didn't come in until I nodded. I remember his hands were shaking. He didn't try to hug me. He sat in the chair Priya had sat in. He folded his hands on his knees, and he looked at me like I was something he'd been afraid would dissolve if he touched it. "Hi," he said. I said hi. "You don't have to believe me," he said. "I brought everything. I brought the photos. I brought the letters. I brought the test. If you want it, you can do another one. I'll pay for it. I had to see you. I'm so sorry I didn't come sooner. I tried. I tried for 32 years. I'm going to give you the short version because the long version took 2 months to come out, in pieces, over many cups of coffee in his kitchen and in mine. His name was Wendell. He had been with my mother for almost 3 years. They had met when she was 28, working as a paralegal in Raleigh, and he had been a contractor doing the renovation of her office building. They were going to get married. He had asked her in the summer of 1993 on a fishing trip to Lake Norman, and she had said yes. Then her sister, her older sister, a woman I had never been told existed, had a breakdown. A real one. Hospitalization. The whole thing. My mother had taken a leave from work to take care of her. Wendell had supported her through it. They had postponed the wedding. During that leave, my mother had gone home to Greensboro for 2 months. While she was there, she had met a man at her sister's church. A man with a stable salary and a house. And what looked, from the outside, like a settled life. A man named Bertram, who would become my legal father. She told Wendell she needed time. Then she told him she was pregnant. Then she told him the baby wasn't his. He didn't believe her. He asked her to do a test. She refused. She said she had made her decision, and she needed him to respect it, and she needed him to stop calling her. He stopped calling her. He was 29 years old. He was, by his own admission, devastated and prideful and stupid. He moved to Asheville. He started his own contracting business. He didn't date anyone seriously for almost a decade. When I was 4, he saw my mother's obituary in the News and Observer. He drove to Raleigh for the funeral. He stood at the back. He saw my father, Bertram, holding a small, dark-haired girl who looked exactly like the woman he had loved. He counted backward. He did the math. I was born 7 months after my mother and Bertram had gotten married. 7 months. Not 9. He went to a lawyer. The lawyer told him that in North Carolina in 1997 the husband of the mother was the presumed legal father, and that without my mother's consent or a court order he would have an enormously difficult time establishing paternity, especially given that he had no relationship with the child and the father was named on the birth certificate. He went back to Asheville. He grieved. He started showing up anyway. Quietly. At a distance. He came to my elementary school's spring concert in 2003, when I was 7, and stood at the back of the auditorium and left before the lights came up. He came to my middle school graduation. He came to my high school graduation, where he sat in the third row from the back and clapped when my name was called, and then drove 3 hours home and cried in his truck in the driveway. He came to my college graduation at NC State. He had a folder full of programs. He had every clipping from every science fair and every academic decathlon and every honor roll list that had ever printed my name. He had written to me 3 times when I was 8, 11, and 15. The letters were addressed to me but sent to the house. I had never received them. He didn't know why. He had assumed I had read them and chosen not to respond. When my father, Bertram, died, Wendell wrote to me again. A long letter. He never sent it. He said he didn't want to be a man who showed up at a funeral and tried to claim a daughter. He said he was going to wait until I was ready, and if I was never ready, that was his consequence to live with. He found out about my hospitalization because a woman he had known for years, a nurse at Atrium Health who had been a friend of my mother's, had recognized my name on the admit list. She had called him at 6 in the evening on Tuesday. He had been in his truck within 20 minutes. He had driven from Asheville to Charlotte in the rain. He had been in the chair next to my bed when I was still unconscious. He had not touched me. He had told the nurses he was no one. He had said, when asked, that he was a friend of the family. He had given them his name only because Della, who missed nothing, had asked twice. He told me all of this in pieces, in the hospital room, with Della standing in the doorway, with Priya texting me from the parking lot asking if I needed her. I asked him if he could prove it. He pulled a folder out of a canvas bag. There were photographs I had never seen, of my mother in her 20s, my mother laughing in a yellow sweater. My mother. Photographs of him and my mother at the lake, at a restaurant, at someone's wedding. A photograph of her wearing a ring I had never seen. There was a copy of the engagement announcement they had drafted but never published. There was a card she had written him on his birthday in 1993. There was a letter from a lab in Cary, dated 3 weeks earlier, from a sample of hair he had collected from a brush at the funeral home 27 years ago and frozen in a Ziploc bag. He had finally gotten it tested 2 months earlier because he was 68 years old and his cardiologist had told him his heart wasn't great, and he had decided he could not die without trying. The test said what we both already knew. I asked him why he had finally come. He said he had been trying to figure out how to write to me for 2 years. He said he had drafted 17 letters. He said when the nurse called him on Tuesday and told him I was unconscious in the ICU, he had realized that he had been a coward, and that he could not afford to be a coward anymore. Because I could not afford it, I'm going to skip ahead now, because the rest of it is the part the comments always want, and I understand why. My stepmother and Camille came back from Cabo on the following Tuesday. By that point, I had been out of the ICU for 4 days, in a regular room for 2 days, and had been discharged that morning. I was at home, in my apartment in Charlotte, with Priya and her wife who had brought me dinner. My stepmother called me. She was at the airport. She said she was going to drive straight to Charlotte to see me. I told her not to come. She laughed. She actually laughed. She said I was being dramatic. She said she had a key to my apartment, which she did, from when I'd moved in 3 years earlier and given her one in case of emergency, which is darkly funny in retrospect. and she would be there by 9. I told her if she came, I would call the police. There was a long silence. She asked what had gotten into me. I told her about the visitor log. I told her about Wendell. I told her I had seen the test results. I told her I had also, that morning, transferred the standing automatic payment I had set up for her household account from active to suspended. I told her that the wedding catering deposit was, regrettably, not going to be coming from me. I told her that I had spoken to a lawyer about the house, which my father had built before he met her, which under the original deed I had a claim to as his biological child of record, and which my lawyer had said was an interesting case. I told her that I was not going to scream at her. I was not going to cry. I was just going to be done. She started telling me what I owed her, what she had done for me, how much she had sacrificed, how Camille was going to be devastated, how my father, Bertram, would be ashamed of me. I said something then that I had been turning over in my head for 4 days, since Wendell had first sat in the chair next to my hospital bed. I said, Bertram knew. He had to have known. The dates don't work. He chose to raise me anyway, and then he chose not to love me anyway. And that's between him and whatever he believed in. But you knew too, and you used it. You used it for 9 years to make sure I felt like I had to earn my place. Because you knew if I ever figured out I didn't have one to begin with, you'd lose your funding. She hung up. She called back 40 minutes later, from the car, with Camille on speaker, crying. Camille said I was breaking up the family. Camille said the wedding was in 4 months. Camille said she had never asked for any of this. I said gently, because I did not have any anger left for Camille, who was, in her own way, also a casualty of the same arrangement. I hope your wedding is beautiful. I am not coming. I am also not paying for it. I love you, and I will love you for the rest of my life, but I am done bleeding for this family. I hung up. I blocked the number. I blocked Camille's. I blocked Brennan's, just in case. I sat on my couch with Priya and her wife and a bowl of soup, and I cried for about an hour. And then I ate the soup. And then I slept for 12 hours. It has been 2 years. My biological father, Wendell, and I have dinner every other Sunday. He drives in from Asheville. He brings me sourdough bread he makes himself. He has met Priya. He has met my friends. He has, slowly, become something I never thought I would have, which is a parent who actually wants to know me. He apologized in the first month for not fighting harder. I told him I forgave him, and then I told him, 6 months later, that I actually meant it. I have a half-sister, it turns out. Wendell married a woman in 2005, and they had a daughter in 2007 named Margot. Margot is 17. She has wanted to meet me for years. She knew about me. Wendell had told her everything when she was old enough. We have lunch every few weeks. She is funny and stubborn and reminds me of nothing so much as the photographs I now have of my mother at 16. I went to therapy. I am still going to therapy. The clotting disorder is managed with medication. I changed jobs. Priya's firm matched my old salary and gave me a senior position and a 4-day week. I save 60% of my income now. I have not, in 2 years, paid anyone else's anything. My stepmother sent a letter 6 months in asking for help with property taxes. I sent it back unopened. Camille got married in May. I saw the photos on her now public Instagram. She looked beautiful. Brennan looked like Brennan. I wished her well, in my heart, and I closed the tab. I want to say one thing, and then I'll stop. If you are watching this and you recognize any of it, if you have been the dependable one, the sturdy one, the one who pays, the one who carries, the one who never gets the steak, I want you to hear me very carefully. The reason they keep asking is not because the next ask will finally be enough. The reason they keep asking is because the asking is the relationship. There is no version of you that is generous enough to be loved. There is only the you that exists right now, which has always been enough and which has always belonged to itself. You don't owe a single person your collapse. I learned that in an ICU on Blythe Boulevard in Charlotte. I wish I had learned it sooner. But I learned it, and now you know it too, and maybe that means something. Maybe that means the worst Tuesday of my life was in some small way, also for you. Take care of yourself. Drink some water. I'll see you in the next one. I've thought about that Tuesday in October more times than I can count. And the thing I keep landing on isn't the stroke, and it isn't even the cinnamon roll in the cafeteria. It's the math. My stepmother had 9 years to know me. Wendell had 32 years of being kept away from me. And in the 72 hours when I was closest to dying, the man who had no legal claim to me sat in that chair every shift. And the woman who had claimed me as her dependent on 9 years of paperwork was on a beach. People are not what they say. People are what they do when no one is watching. And when it costs them something. And when the easier choice is the one nobody would blame them for. My stepmother chose Cabo because the easier choice was always there. And I had spent my whole life paving it smoother for her. That's the part I had to sit with in therapy for a long time. I didn't deserve what happened to me. But I had also, in my own quiet way, been teaching her for years that nothing she did to me would ever cost her anything. The world runs on cause and effect, and I had been absorbing the cost of being someone's daughter for so long that the bill never came due on her end. Until I stopped paying it. And then, almost overnight, the whole arrangement collapsed. Because it had never been a relationship, it had been a subsidy. I want to say something to anyone watching who is the strong one in their family. The one who sends the money. The one who answers the phone at midnight. The one who never gets the steak. Being kind is not the same as being available. Being generous is not the same as being expendable. There is a kind of strength that looks like endurance, and there is a kind of strength that looks like saying the true sentence out loud, even when it breaks the room. I had the first kind for 23 years. I'm still learning the second. The mind is the muscle that decides which is which. I had to learn to read the situation, not just feel it. I had to learn that a person who only calls when they need something is not, in any meaningful sense, calling you. And I had to learn that the courage to walk away from people who share your last name is not a betrayal of family. It is what family was supposed to mean in the first place. Wendell is 68 years old and he bakes bread. He shows up. He showed up when I was unconscious, and he shows up now when I'm fine, and that, more than any blood test, is what made him my father. You build the people in your life the way you build a structure. You check the load. You check the joints. You see what holds. The ones who hold are the ones who get the keys. Take care of the version of you that has been carrying everyone. She is the one who got you this far. She deserves to put the weight down.